Now, this was what Masonry was originally founded on, and this is what continues, of course, today. But English, British Masonry, and American Masonry, which came right from it, was based primarily on the philosophy of John Locke, which was reasonable, and which was not radical and reasonable, and our forms of government come from that. However, and this is where things get where we're talking about this conspiracy and things like this. Over on the continent in Europe, the Masonry on the continent was not as influenced by John Locke as it should have been. It became more influenced by Rousseau, and Jean Rousseau was much more radical in his philosophy. Yes, he believed in equality. Yes, he believed in liberty. Yes, he believed in freedom and all of that. But the problem was he didn't have any respect for God, and he didn't have any respect for tradition. He didn't have any respect for culture, and so consequently, what happened with Rousseau's philosophy, as we saw in the French Revolution, what happened was that it very quickly led to dictatorships, to totalitarian regimes, and so this is the difference in the two philosophies of two types of masonry. Now, I'm not saying that all continental masonry is radical, but this Rousseauian influence was definitely involved, and especially in a group that got started in Bavaria called the Illuminati. Now, I know the conspiracy theory people are always talking about the Illuminati. Well, the Illuminati it was founded right a couple of months before the American Revolution, so they really didn't have anything to do with the American Revolution. And by the way, George Washington wouldn't allow them in the United States. And so, but the Illuminati were founded in Bavaria by Adam Weishaupt, and he was a professor at the University of Ingolstadt, and he was very, very much of a radical liberal, and he hated the Jesuits. So he wanted to break Bavaria was a Catholic country, and he was essentially an atheist. And the original Illuminati structure had nothing to do with mysticism at all. It was strictly political, and it was Rousseau-type radical politics. Actually, Adam Weishaupt was really almost more influenced by one of Rousseau's colleagues, Claude Helvetius. And Helvetius was even more radical than Rousseau. And so the Illuminati, in order to infiltrate Masonry, which was one of Weishaupt's ideas, he wanted to infiltrate Masonry. But in order to infiltrate Masonry, he had to get mystical, because Masonry, being generally respecting God and having a spiritual quality to it, it needed some form of spirituality. So in order to make his Illuminati more popular for Masons, and so he could get the Masons into it, he brought on board a Masonic mystic scholar, Baron von Knigge, and Baron von Knigge really was a mystic. So Knigge liked the basic principles of the Illuminati, but he wanted to make it mystical. And so he did. So they managed to infiltrate. They only had a 10-year run before they got kicked out from everywhere. But they infiltrated the Central European Masonic lodges, and especially after Baron Knigge got it going. And a few years, Weishaupt and Knigge came at loggerheads. Weishaupt couldn't stand the mysticism, so he forced Baron Knigge out. And Carnegie turned around and exposed him. And he just, oh yeah, and so that was the beginning of the end of the Illuminati. Now, the Illuminati didn't have that much influence on the French Revolution. The French had their own form of radicalism going over there in their lodges, but the Rousseauian thing, the basic same philosophy, was very much behind the French Revolution. That's one of the reasons why the French Revolution was a really, really terrible thing, and it was the bloodbath and the innocent people that were killed as a result of it was a presage of what was to come. And this sort of thing eventually ended up in Napoleon, and then of course it went on and on into Nazism and into Stalinism and communism. This is the outgrowth of the Rousseau philosophy, and that was somewhat aided by Continental Masonry to some degree. Now, one of the things that happened over in the United States, and to get back to another part of Masonic history that's not anything that's kind of bad, but over in the United States, Masonry, still based on Locke's philosophy, was very, very much a part of the founding of the United States, and so many of the founding fathers were Masons, and so Masonry became a gentleman's, the same thing as England. It became an elite gentleman's club, and you really, if you wanted to be successful in politics and business, it was a good idea to be a Mason. And so the Masons had a lot of power in the United States back in the 1820s. In the 1820s, they were very powerful. And the common, the farmers and the poor people and the laborers and all, they resented this. They resented these wealthy businessmen and politicians and all having this secret society, and they were kind of simmering and resenting it. And then a fellow by the name of William Morgan, who was a member of one of the Masonic lodges, he had some problems in his lodge, and then he got out, and then he just said he announced that he was going to publish all their secrets. And he said, I'm going to publish all the secrets of Masonry. And actually what he was doing was he was trying to get the Masons to buy him off. Well, they wouldn't. And so he started printing his book, and his print shop burned down, and then he got arrested on a trumped-up charge, and then he somehow or other disappeared from the jail, and he was never found again. Now, nobody can prove that anybody really got rid of him, but it's a pretty good idea. It's pretty probable that his lodge brothers probably got rid of him. Well, this caused a furor in the United States, and the result was that Masonry was almost destroyed. The common people, the farmers and the laborers and the preachers, especially the fundamentalist preachers, and Christianity, of course, grassroots Christianity was very, very strong in the country, and so there was this tremendous anti-Masonic movement. They even had a political party. The first third party in the United States was the anti-Mason party, and they just about wiped Masonry out. So after we recovered from the Morgan affair, Masonry decided that, hey, we can't be elitist anymore. We got to have to take honest and responsible people from all walks of life, men from all walks of life, laborers, farmers, people with low incomes, providing they're responsible, providing they can pay their dues, which we would keep reasonable. And so Masonry reestablished itself as very egalitarian. It was available to all men, and all men of good report. In other words, you got to be a good citizen, and you have to be able to be responsible. But other than that, as long as you don't have a felony, as long as you profess a belief in God, you can be a Mason. And, Masons don't invite you. You have to ask them. And so, consequently, anybody who petitions has a right to petition and become a Mason. So this meant that American Masonry no longer involved itself in politics, and it no longer involved itself in trying to run things. And each state had its own Grand Lodge. Now, so American Masonry really is not involved in since the Morgan affair, has not been involved in any kind of political conspiracies at all. Over in England, they're still more elite than we are. They have come in for some criticism over in England for being a little too secretive and very elite and all. But here again, they're still based on John Locke's philosophy, and they're not trying to overthrow governments or anything of that nature. And yet, as I said, the Rousseauian philosophy that influenced some of the continental Masonic groups certainly was a bit radical. Now, I mentioned Fabian socialism, and of course that's the Round Table group and all of that. We might say that it does follow the John Locke current more so than it does the Rousseau current. Marxism, on the other hand, and all that follows the Rousseau current, and so Fabian socialism, that's George Bernard Shaw and Cecil Rhodes and that group, the Round Table group over in England. They were really not related to Marxism. This Marxism is off on its own, as I say, off on the Rousseau current. Now, Bertrand Russell, who's a very left-wing philosopher, Bertrand Russell said that in order to understand this, you'd understand that Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill were both descended from John Locke, whereas Hitler is descended from Rousseau. Now, if Bertrand Russell wasn't as left-wing as he was, he would have said Hitler and Stalin. But because he was very left-wing, he left Stalin out. But it's the same sort of thing. So you need to understand that even though this Fabian socialism and that, of course, is supposed to be this control the CFR or be the CFR is supposed to be an outgrowth of that. This is all it's all descends basically from the John Locke philosophy. So actually, when we get down to great Masonic conspiracies, they really aren't. They're really not so conspiratorial when you understand what Masonry is supposed to do, what its principle is, and the currents, the philosophical currents that directed it.